Welcome to the BXG Podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet.
You think it's just going to be barbecue sauce?
Because if you actually read those books, it's just gobbledygook.
I really think clothes should be mandatory.
Speaking of Star Wars,
Captain America.
trailer reaction video. Time to talk about The Last of Us. That snarl there in the middle is kind of
The snarl is kills me.
Episode 5. What was this one called? So unprepared as always. It's like every week I'm like, what was this episode called? The Long Kiss Goodnight or something like that. That's not accurate.
And then survive. Endure and survive. Endure and survive. Okay. Yeah. Endure and survive. Yeah.
End of episode 4, Joel and Ellie are woken up by these two unknown characters who we will soon learn are Henry and Sam, pointing guns in their faces. And Sam Henry says, listen, I've got a plan to get us out of this city and I need your help. So, spoiler free, what did you think of this episode? We'll get into the details of the spoilers and some of the things in a little bit.
I feel like it's a hard episode to not divulge a lot without. I mean, it was a good episode. I mean, it was a really good episode. I mean, it's impactful. I will say I did see what ends up happening. I definitely thought that was going to happen. I will say while I thought this was a good episode, it was not my favorite episode because I felt like it was almost too predictive in my opinion on that, of like what was end up going to happen. Now, going forward, I don't know what's going to happen for sure. I still don't really know. I mean, there's a group of people there that, we're trying to get after them, and then everything pops up without like divulging too much. I think this kind of still build the connection between Joel and Ellie, but beyond that, without saying too much, I mean, I thought it was a good episode. It wasn't, to me personally, the best episode of this season, but I thought it was a good episode in the sense of we know not to get connected to anyone. I think
nobody has plot armor.
Yeah, nobody has plot armor except maybe the two main characters, as far as I could, because it is based on a video game that are based off these two characters. But I don't think you ever want to think that any character you get introduced is going to last more than an episode. I definitely think that. And if they do, it's like, wow, they really lasted a long. And that's sort of the fun thing is like if they make it more than an episode, they made it. They made it for a while. So. Yeah. For me, that's what I thought. I thought it was a good episode, not the best episode, but a good enough episode where you're like, I still think this episode, the show is still very, very good. It doesn't downplay it. I mean, we just had a very, very good episode in episode 3, where that was one of the best episodes so far this year of anything. I just think now we're leading into a different part of this show where I think there's going to be a lot more known about Joel. I really do. I feel like that's what we're leading into because we started to realize that who they meet, there's a lot more stuff going on behind the scenes. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think we start to realize that, and we know Joel's not a good guy, but we haven't heard enough. And I think we might start seeing a little bit more about this.
So I don't think that this was the best episode of the season, but it was my favorite episode of the season.
Okay.
And which is funny because it has probably the things that are in this episode in particular. This is the first time that I felt like the show has stumbled a little bit in terms of relative storytelling and like realism of the storytelling. But with that being said, the last half of the show, the last half of this episode is so impactful that it manages to minimize some of the things that I would nitpick. I don't think to say that a couple of these things are spoilers. I don't necessarily think they are. Some of the nitpicks that I have, number one being that if you're traveling from Boston to Wyoming, you're going on 90 or 80. You're not going on 70. You would never even pass through Missouri. So the fact that they're in Kansas City doesn't actually make sense from a storytelling standpoint. And I was thinking this too during the last episode where I'm like, they're coming from the east. They're going to Wyoming. I-80 runs straight through Des Moines, Iowa. And that was because that's how my uncle lived in Kansas City, and that's how he would drive.
Right.
He would drive to Des Moines and then hit 80 and just drive the rest of the way back to Pennsylvania. So, it was explained why they chose to use Kansas City, because it was the city that was most relative to where they were on site filming in Calgary, Canada. The other thing is that, and this doesn't really get into major spoilers, it's mild, like very, very mild spoilers. I don't think that they did a great job of fleshing out the story of these quote unquote collaborators, other than, okay, we're going to feed information to the government army in exchange for food safety, whatever. And one big example of that is given, but also in the sense that this resistance movement is awfully violent. And I just felt like there was I don't want to say plot holes, but missing pieces in that particular story. And I actually just went back last night and watched the first episode again with Melissa, my wife, who hasn't had an opportunity to start the show yet, but like I said, we watched the first one. And they talk in the first episode about the fireflies in the different cities. And so this city not having any type of firefly presence is kind of strange to me when it's known that they're in all these different cities. So I felt like there were some stumbling blocks in this episode that we haven't necessarily seen to this point. But like I said, the entire second half of the episode completely salvaged all of that from the different impactful moments, and we'll kind of break those down. Are you ready to get into?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's break it down.
We'll get into spoilers here.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to talk about is the characters of Henry and Sam. Actually, you know what? Let me back up.
Sorry.
Before we talk about Sam and Henry, we got to pay some bills, Greg.
Oh, hell yeah.
This week, we are delighted to tell you about composting. Recycling food and other organic waste into compost provides a range of environmental benefits, including improving soil health, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, recycling nutrients, and mitigating the impact of droughts. Composting. For more information, see your local garbage can. You ever have a compost pile when you were a kid?
Not when I was a kid. Janie's parents do a compost bin.
Yeah.
Smells real funky.
Oh yeah, it's rotting.
It's rotting stuff, but it is good for your plant life.
Yeah.
So,
and it is apparently it's good for mitigating the impact of drought. So all you folks out in California, but
Yeah, just throw a
composting.
lot of compost on the ground and it'll stop the drought.
I don't know if
Just
that's
recognize that we live in a desert and it's always been a drought. So
it's a problem with
shut your
sand. It
mouth.
gets everywhere.
Yep, exactly. It's in my shoes.
Yeah, it's coarse and it's it gets everywhere.
It's sandy.
For more information about sand, contact your local beach. Henry and Sam, tell me your take on these two particular characters. Henry and Sam are a brother pair of African Americans. Henry is known as a collaborator, and then Sam is his brother who is very sick, who is deaf, uses ASL to speak, and Henry had to make a deal basically to get him his medicine to cure his illness. What was your take on these two? Before this is what I'll say though, is before we get into the end of the episode, what was your take on Henry and Sam kind of up till that point?
I feel like they were just another version of Joel and Ellie, as like other people crossing paths. Like, I mean, Ellie's not sick, but she's been infected and, she has a cure, so she's not sick. And then Joel's like, trying to get through it any way he can. And I felt they were just, the same people crossing paths really at this point. So it was good. It was a good idea. And I don't, like I said, I don't know about the video games. I don't know if this is how they cross paths in the video games or they seem that. But I mean, there's a thing where like I understood the idea of putting him in there. I could see their fate coming almost like the second it happened. I don't know why. Maybe it's just from watching other TV shows and kind of putting those pieces together, or just watching other TV shows and then realizing how this TV show works that I put pieces together. But I mean, I thought they were good characters, but I did not expect a lot going forward.
So in the game, there is no, and I kind of mentioned this last week when we talked about this group led by Kathleen and Harry. That's not really a thing in the game. That was something that they added to the game, or I'm sorry, that was something that was added to the episode to kind of just like give a little bit more texture to this area. I would add that how they meet in the game, Henry and Sam and Joel and Ellie, is basically they're trying to cross Pittsburgh together. And they're trying to get through Pittsburgh, and they just kind of stumble into this building where Henry and Sam are also kind of camped out, and Henry talks about they were involved. They were with another group of people that got separated. They're all going to meet at this radio tower. And so the other big change is that in the game, Sam is not deaf. He has no backstory of being ill in any way. He's just Henry's little brother. And I do think that they are a mirror of Joel and Ellie, but I also think that it's kind of funny because it plays on our whole our whole conversation of like mirror dimension people, because Henry is extremely nonviolent
Right.
in the show. I mean, he does what he needs to do in the game. There's certainly violence involved, but he's very nonviolent, and he's also kind of a little bit of an underhanded type character. I mean, there's the scene where he admits that he's a collaborator and Joel says, "I don't work with rats." And so there is this kind of like juxtaposition of Joel is this very violent person, but he also seems to have some type of code of honor, and Henry doesn't. In the game, Sam is closer to Ellie's age. He's very young in the show. I believe they say he's 8. And in the game, he's much closer. I really like these two characters. things play out a lot differently in the game with them, as far as there's a moment where Henry has the opportunity to save Joel, and he says, I have to take care of my brother, and just pieces out on him. And then there's another moment where he has an opportunity to save Joel, and he does. And so, like, seeing the juxtaposition of these characters, and they do make this sort of like tenuous alliance where it's like, okay, we're these two adults and we have these two kids that we have to take care of, and we're gonna get through this, even though at the drop of a hat, to save his own skin, Henry would betray Joel. And so I felt like they actually kind of gave him, in the scene where there is the sniper shooting at them, and then Kathleen and her whole force of people kind of comes through, and it makes him a little bit more honorable, that he's like, okay, I'm going to give myself up and I'm going to let the kids run. So let's talk about that particular sequence as well, with Kathleen and her crew track Joel, Henry, Sam, Ellie down in this kind of walled off corridor. It's like a cul-de-sac kind of looking thing, this street where they're about to cross the bridge and make it out of the city. And Joel kind of gets the drop on the sniper, shoots the driver of the vehicle, who is kind of clearing all the cars out. And then that truck crashes into a house, and there's like a sinkhole, I guess, and then an army of runners, clickers, and then ultimately the bloater comes out. What was your take on that sequence, those characters, or that like army of the dead kind of? It's not really an army of the dead, but like all these runners, clickers, and then finally the bloater, which was, by the way, done with practical effects. The bloater was on practical effects.
I love the bloater. I thought that was so cool. I mean, they're just big, strong guy ripping stuff off. I mean, I thought that scene was really cool. I think it shows like that impact, where it was that tense moment where when the truck falls in and you're just waiting, and you kind of know what's going to happen, but you don't know. It's that weird, you know what I mean? It's that idea of like, well, I think things are going to happen. And there's that second, and then just everything comes out. And for me, it was just like, well, now the good guys are going to survive this. That's what I thought. I mean, the second that happens, it's like, oh, the people we're rooting for in this particular episode are going to make it, and then the bad guys aren't, for whatever reason. And then you see the bloater rip the guy's head off.
Yeah,
and you're like rooting for that. Yeah,
I'm gonna actually show you this real quick.
Stop.
Okay, there we go. So what I'm going to show you actually is like a bloater death in the game, and just so you can see, and in the show it was Jeffrey Pierce, who plays Perry, the kind of armed dude that's with Kathleen, and then obviously, as we mentioned, Jeffrey Pierce is the voice of Tommy in the game. But so this is what this kind of looks like, and it's pretty accurate. We'll slow it down here real quick.
So that's Joel.
So that's Joel in the game, yeah. And then this is the bloater. And he does exactly what he does to Harry in the show, which is he kind of grabs him by the mouth and just tears his head off.
So that's how Joel goes out?
I mean, if you die.
Okay.
Like in the game, that's like a possible like game over screen, basically. No, that's not how Joel goes out. Were you very concerned there for a moment?
I was very concerned. Like, oh shit.
I apologize.
Okay.
So I just wanted to show that was like the exact death animation that you get.
Yeah, it was cool.
The bloater kills you in the game. So that was pretty sweet. I saw a lot of people who were real happy about that on Twitter. I didn't think, though, that they did a good job of explaining what the bloater was. And I got a message from like one of my friends who has not played the game. He's not a video game guy. And he's like, well, what's up with this big clicker? Why is there big clickers now? It's like, okay, well, in the game, they do a really nice job of explaining it to you that the infected who are start out as runners and then eventually evolve into the clickers will then continue to evolve, and to the point that the fungus kind of covers their entire body with armor. And then that's why they're like a little bit bigger, a little bit sturdier, harder to bring down. And then in the game, they can actually like secrete these like spores and throw them at you. But since they've kind of eliminated spores as a way of infecting in the show, that was why that wasn't in place. It was almost like a scenario where, okay, we're just going to make this like a really big, strong version of the clicker. I thought it worked. I mean, you know, those are like, you fight a handful of those in the game, and every time it's a pain in the ass. And it's just like, because they're so difficult to kill, and you have to like use like Molotov cocktails and nail bombs and stuff like that. But anyway, before we touch on the end, there's another sequence that I wanted to touch on, not because it's so much different from the game, but it's what was left out of the game. And that is the area underneath in the tunnels that they explore, and they kind of see that it was like a community, and there was obviously kids there. And there's a picture that says like our protectors, Danny and Ish. So what did you think about that particular area of the show, and like seeing Sam and Ellie be able to spend just a few moments as like kids?
I mean, I thought that honestly was the best part of the show. I thought it was a cool moment where like they do get to be kids, and they have I forget what that's called, but like where you rip the sheet and it.
Yeah.
What is that? I don't know what that's called.
It's like disappearing ink or something.
The disappearing ink. If it's not that, but everyone knows.
Yeah.
It's like you have the gray sheet, you write something, and then you flip it up. And
right.
it was really the first time that Ellie was a kid that I can think of this show, and I thought that was really cool. I mean, it was a good moment because he is deaf and she could still interact with him. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was the best. For me, it was the best part of the show because you got to see her kind of be normalized,
sure.
And that was the first part of it, and it built that connection, and it leads to the part where like he shows that he's infected,
mm-hmm.
and then she's like, "Well, I'm medicine," but yeah.
Well, that was at the end, not
right.
Yeah,
but I mean, like
it
is part of that thing where she builds this connection enough
right.
with him to have that. Without this part of the show, there's not that connection.
Yeah. I really liked that they put the picture in with Ish. Ish is a character that you never meet in the game, but you can follow his story along through the town, through the part of Pittsburgh that they work through. It's like outskirts of Pittsburgh after they go into the river or whatever. And you can you find like notebooks. And that's one of the really clever ways that they tell the story of what happened between like Outbreak Day and now in the game, is you find these different collectibles, and they have like, there will be like maps or journal entries or notes or letters or whatever. And you can kind of piece that together. And in this section, Ish is a character who meets up with this group of people. He's kind of on his own, and then he starts to trade with them, and eventually they form this community in these tunnels, and you can see how it builds up to it, but then you can also see how it like starts to unravel for them as well. And this is a part of the game, and this is I'm just gonna hit this one more time.
Hit me, baby, one more time.
I just want to, because this is like a really, to me, it's a really impactful moment in the game. So this is spoilers for a 13-year-old game or a 10-year-old game. When you go through that section, everybody's turned, and there are what are called stalkers, which is a different type of they're like runners, but they're so like small that you can't hear them with your hearing thing, and you have to kill them, and then you realize that it's all the kids that are in this community, and so you're just like blowing their heads off with a shotgun. And so I think that they kind of played on that a little bit with how Kathleen dies at the end, where she gets attacked by this little kid clicker. But that's in that moment you're going through and you're like, oh man, there's like a whole community down here, and look what they had. And the one part looks like a little kid's classroom, like almost like a daycare or like a pre-K thing. And then you go into a room and there's like, you can hear like wrenches and shit falling off the wall, and they start coming at you and they're like, oh man, these are really little clickers. And it's like, oh, they're the kids.
They're the
And
kids.
so it's like a
weird.
very, very, very kind of fucked up moment. But I think the real hurt piece is for this episode is what ultimately happens to Sam and subsequently Henry in the struggle. And this does play out identically to the game. In that sequence, they don't come out of a sinkhole. They just kind of come from all the houses that are around you. And Joel's up in the building trying to like sniper rifle and stuff like that. And there is a time in which Sam and Henry kind of get attacked, and there's clickers on top of Sam and he gets bit. And then that night when they're camping out, whatever, and and this is how it happens in the show is, he starts to ask the questions of, do you think you're still inside when you turn? Basically, do you think you're still
right?
And so he's asking Ellie. In the show, she tries to cure him with her blood, which is that's not canon, so to speak. But it doesn't work. And the next morning she goes to see him and he attacks her, and then Sam shoots him, or not Sam, Henry blows his head off, and then is like, what have I done? And then he kills himself. And I always found that to be, with each playthrough, it's a really hard thing to watch. And this is the thing about this game is the first time I played it, I didn't have any kids. And then every time I've played it since, I've had at least one kid. It just hits differently.
Sure.
When you have people that you're responsible for. And so every time I play through, that scene gets harder and harder every single time. And so I just was curious what your thoughts on it. Like you said, you maybe saw it coming, but that doesn't lessen the.
Oh, it doesn't lessen the blow. I mean, it was still like, I literally said like, holy you're just like, you're saying that even if it even though I thought, what I thought is they're both going to die. I didn't realize it was going to be like, he shoots him and then shoots himself.
Yeah.
You don't see that necessarily coming. You're just like, well, I think they're going to both die because whatever. But yeah, it's not him Sam turning and then getting killed, and then Henry blowing his own head off. And they're trying to stop him. Joel tries to stop him, and it doesn't matter because he can't overcome it. And it's one of those things where, like, it's not. It sounds such a weird thing to say, but I think Joel does the right thing because there's no way he could have lived with that.
Right.
There's no way he lives with shooting Sam and going on with his life like it's normal, because nothing's normal anyhow in the outside world. So
right.
Why go through it? Why go through it? So it's still very impactful. It's still like a what the hell moment. Like, what that sucks.
I was surprised that they showed him shooting Sam. Like they showed Sam just getting shot in the head.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fucking crazy. And then you don't see him shoot himself. But just a quick shout out, Henry, played by Lamar Johnson. He's probably most well known at this point for Your Honor, a TV series, Your Honor, and then also The Next Step, which is also a TV series. It's about a troupe of dancers. So there's that.
Nice.
And then Sam is played by Kevon Woodward, and this is his second role. The first is as it's called Seeds of Hope, the Andrew Jackson Foster story, and he plays a deaf student in that. He is a deaf actor.
He's a deaf actor, yeah.
They talked a little bit about him with him during the behind the scenes or the making of the episode after the show. I read a cute article about how he was like afraid of the bloater, and then the guy in the suit like took his head off and was like, "No, it's just a guy," you know. But yeah. So I think the thing is that this show is very intense most of the time. There's not a lot of breaks, and unfortunately I think that, well, not unfortunately, but I think anytime that you've seen that so far of, okay, this is like kind of we can breathe a little bit. And I think a good example is when they found all that in the tunnels and they're able to like kick the soccer ball around or whatever. That's taken away very quickly.
Right.
In most in these circumstances. Next episode, which you and I both watched this on. Well, I watched it on Friday. I don't know when because
I watched Saturday. Yeah, I watched Saturday.
They released it early, but the next episode will be on the 19th. And per the previews, they make it to Wyoming. They find Tommy, and another interesting segment of the game. Honestly, probably my least favorite segment of the game, if I'm being honest. The Pittsburgh section, the section with Sam and Henry, is that, and Bill's Town are my favorites. And then the university, which is later altogether. But yeah, I mean, you know, what's your read for Tommy and that whole situation?
I feel like Tommy's like in a weird place.
Well, he's in Wyoming, so yeah, he's in a weird place.
Well, but I mean, like, yeah, beyond what we normally, I just think he's in a weird place, doesn't trust Joel, all those things. So I think that's going to be a very interesting scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it's alluded to in the first episode. They're not on great terms. He mentions, and I just remember this. Like I said, I just watched it last night, but they're not on great terms, and he's kind of like, Joel accuses Marlene in that first episode of turning his brother against him. So there is going to be probably some feelings that need sorted out. So we'll see.
Maybe a good fishing part though. Good trout fish area there. So maybe go trout fishing. It's like 20 minutes of just trout fishing.
Perhaps.
Streams, land, and God. That's all you need.
Is that Wyoming state motto?
It's not that, but it could be.
Oh.
Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. It's trout fishing area.
Big sky country.
All of it. Well, Montana's attention is actually that, but
big sky country.
They're all big sky country.
Equal rights is the state motto of Wyoming. It's equal rights. That's it.
I'm not sure about that.
1869, Wyoming's constitution was the first such document to give equal voting and office holding rights to women. So there you go.
Okay.
Equal rights.
It stopped there. It stopped there with equal rights, but
I don't know. Did it?
Well,
does anybody even live in Wyoming? Like, let's be real for a minute.
It's the least populous state in the country, I think.
It is. That's confirmed. Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful though, from what I've heard. Beautiful.
Oh, I'm sure. Certainly. But anyway,
what does one do in Wyoming?
I think you said it.
Yeah, it's you just trout. You just fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool football logo.
Cowboys.
It's a cool logo. That's where Josh Allen went to school.
Is it? I thought he was in Dakota State, one of those guys.
Yeah, Wyoming. Yeah, I think he went to Wyoming.
Oh, okay. Well,
the brown and yellow, the cowboy guy. It's cool. It's a cool logo.
It's gross colors, though.
It's gross colors, but it's a cool logo.
Sure.
Cowboys.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next topic.